and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I'm Cameron Reigle.
And we've got to crank out this episode before the next one. And we'll tell you what the next one is in just a minute or two. But first, let's get to some due diligence. First of all, of course, DK Vine is on Patreon. DKVine.com/Patreon. You get all sorts of wacky, fun time rewards, like listening to the Kongversation live, and then being forced to wait 20 minutes while we have technical difficulties to listen to the Kongversation live. But hey, what do you expect? $5 a month. A reward like that should really be $200 or $300 a month. We're losing money by offering it at such bargain basement prices. Anyway, DKVine.com/Patreon helps the site out. And in turn, that helps you out because we're able to provide more fun sunshine in your life on a day-to-day basis.
We need that sunshine because we can't pay the electric bill either.
Well, with all the hurricanes blowing through, we may not have any electricity to speak of soon. Hopefully we'll have electricity later this week when we're scheduled to do another Kongversation. Anyway, check out DK Vine itself. We have a forum, never been a better time to join, etc. Subscribe to DK Vine on YouTube and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And don't forget that, as far as the Kongversation goes, you can always reach us and get your voice on the show by calling the DK Vine hotline. And that's at 1-202-630-VINE or 8463 for those of you who are alphabetically challenged. And of course, there's a jingle that goes along with that. Cameron, I don't know how musical you are, but would you like to sing the jingle?
I'll try. To reach us by cell or landline, call 1-202-630 and a word. That word is Vine.
Thank you. That was beautiful. You have a lovely singing voice. Art, music. Is there nothing you can't do?
Well, it's not so much that I can't do it, it's that it'll take me a while to actually do it.
So coming up with a witty response is something you can't do. Oh, that makes me feel better.
Correct.
I feel so bad that so many of our staffers are multi-talented Renaissance men, and all I can do is write increasingly banal Facebook posts.
I don't know if having a deep voice is a talent.
So anyway, we're on iTunes, the Kongversation that is, so subscribe on iTunes, rate us on iTunes, or check us out on other platforms. We're on TuneIn, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. Tell your friends about the Kongversation, and especially if your friend is Fabio, because we want to get Mr. Fabio on as a guest. Of course, as always, #BringBackTheSpiders. Check out the Sea of Thieves Insider program at seaofthieves.com/insider. They're letting in more and more people every month to let people play Sea of Thieves. The Sea of Thieves game. Why couldn't I think of the word game? That's a foreboding omen for the episode ahead. They're adding content for the game every month, which we can't talk about because everybody in the technical alpha is under an NDA. But it would be great to play with you, all of you, to see you out on the ocean. Seriously, I know we say this time and again on the show, but Sea of Thieves is probably the most fun I've ever had playing a game. It's just getting more robust as time goes on. And I would love to share the experience with all of you at home. So, seaofthieves.com/insider. Hey, we don't have to show for this anymore. Robin Beanland is currently bicycling across the length of Britain as we speak. He did a good job for himself. He raised through justgiving.com approximately £3,813. So that's a pretty impressive haul that's going to Special Effect, the charity he's raising money for.
I believe you can still donate, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, you can? Well, okay. Well, if you want to, knock yourself out.
Yeah, he is currently on day 2 of a 9-day ride, I believe.
Yeah, because we're recording this on Sunday, the 10th of September. So, day 2. Hopefully he comes back in one piece, because it would be a crying shame if he didn't get to complete Sea of Thieves. I don't know why we're so afraid for him. This 9-day bicycle trek. I assume it's because it's so far beyond what we're capable of.
Yeah, I just assume everybody is as made of, like, glass and paper mache as I am.
Yeah, it's becoming a situation where, like, will George R.R. Martin finish the Game of Thrones book series before his morbid obesity does him in? And I guess we're afraid that Robin is not going to finish the Sea of Thieves score before chronic bicycle fatigue shuts his body down. But he's in great shape, and we're not. So all the best to Robin Beeland. Speaking of Rare employees, we have a big announcement to make. We're scheduled to sit down with not just any Rare employee, but the Rare employee. Craig Duncan, the head of Rare, studio head, will be joining us on the Kongversation for a special Talk with a Pirate Day episode. So, Cameron, you're going to be with me on that episode. Are you getting excited?
Yeah. You know when we were talking about things I'm not good at? Yeah, calming my nerves is one. I'm excited to the point of shaking on this one.
Cool. Well, just don't hold your microphone because it's going to be a bitch to level that audio.
Craig Duncan.
Maybe we should save this for Halloween and just claim he's a ghost. Craig! Nah, it'll be fun to sit down with him. Our first active Rare employee on the show. Because before this, it's been members of Platonic who were formerly with Rare. But now we're getting someone active within the belly of the Microsoft beast.
Well, yeah, we actually got someone from Team Dakota on before we got anyone from Rare.
Oh, that is true. That is true.
So we have been in the Microsoft pool, just not the deep end. Not to make any disparaging implication to Team Dakota either. I don't mean to come off that way.
And you saw what Microsoft did to Project Spark after we were done with them, so fingers crossed we won't kill Rare.
Yeah, so they heard Pocket Tales in the hallways, and that was it. Shut her down.
Yeah, Big Brother Bill is listening, so we've got to be on our best behavior for this one. But we brought up Platonic, and we had the lovely fortune to sit down with Chris Sutherland, and then Andy Robinson and Steve Males, the past 2 years here on the Kongversation. And Platonic, when they came out of the closet, so to speak, as a company, as a studio in early 2015, we didn't know what to really expect at the time. We were optimistic, we were hopeful, but I don't think any of us knew that Ukulele was going to be as successful as it was right out of the gate. I believe it was something like the #1 UK Kickstarter of all time, right?
Yeah, I think it briefly held the title of most successful game Kickstarter of all time. Then I think subsequent ones beat it, but I think Ukulele sort of opened the floodgates, and maybe, I mean, Mighty Number 9 has a little bit of this too, even though that is what it was. Just sort of shows an example of, this is a viable way for us to finance a game. Right.
And early 2015, and it seems like a lifetime ago, because we're so entrenched in this renaissance right now, where, obviously the mothership is doing Sea of Thieves, and Platonic has done Ukulele, and has designs on games beyond that, and everything is so cemented now, and a lot of the bitterness and negativity that was robust in the Rare fan community it's kind of been weeded out for the most part. I mean, you still encounter it from time to time, but for the most part, it's a very harmonious time, and it really shows that the fan base for Rare of all the Rare properties, and specifically the type of games Rare is known for, is still there. And following Ukulele's success, I think that has really inspired others, either from that Rare legacy or those who are adjacent to it or admiring it from afar, to want to tap into that 1990s vintage Rare magic. So, we've had Ukulele, and that specifically went after fans of Banjo-Kazooie, and more specifically, fans of Banjo-Kazooie who maybe weren't that satisfied with nuts and bolts, and wanted to return to that 1998 style of banjo game. And I think they hit all the right chords with Ukulele. It's funny, since the Spit and Polish patch came out, I've fallen more and more in love with Ukulele, more so than when I initially played it. It's just really endeared itself to me now that they fixed all of these little tiny niggling things that didn't really bother me at the time. But now that they've fixed them, I realize, maybe they were subconsciously keeping me from going all in on Yuka. And now I'm finding myself really into Yuka again all of a sudden. And, Yuka has excited fans of that one specific style of Rare game. And we know that Playtonic is planning on broadening out to different genres and doing different things. But now we've got these new projects that have either just been released or just been announced that seem to be taking aim at Donkey Kong Country fans, among others, from the Rare legacy. And so we're going to be talking about two of them today. And the first one we're going to be discussing is the one that has been released, or at least been released in one form, and that is Kroko Bongo. And Kroko Bongo is the latest release from FortuneFish. And for those of you who do not remember, FortuneFish has ties to the Stamper Brothers. And I believe the company was founded by Tim Stamper's son, and then was heavily invested in by Tim and Chris. And of course, the Stamper Brothers were the founders of Rare, the original studio heads at Rare, pre-Craig Duncan, and they left Rare in 2006, I want to say?
Shortly after Viva Pinata released, I think.
Yeah, and I know Chris Stamper went off and bought himself a castle, became a crazy Dracula-type man. He wears a cape and holds a candelabra as he walks down the staircase to greet wayward visitors.
I like to imagine it's like deliberately decorated like a castle from Night Lore. Every individual room is a different single color.
See, I was just picturing Bachelor's Castle from Conker's Bad Fur Day. And he's even styled his hair like Gary Oldman from off of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Please, Chris Stamper, if you're listening, make that a reality. Just upend your entire life and become some sort of monstrous vampiric figure. For me, one of your biggest fans. Yeah, but Tim Stamper's son is actually the founder and head of FortuneFish. And I could be wrong, because, the Stamper's MO is to be incredibly secretive. A lot more secretive than Rare is now.
Well, so secretive. Do we know if it's a son or grandson? Or grandson?
I believe it will change depending on who is writing Tim Stamper's dialogue. We'll have to do some heavy retconning over time. But they've been around for a couple of years now, and Rare fans paid attention when FortuneFish came into being. But admittedly, we just kind of lost sight of them. And we had Playtonic releasing Yuka and the Sea of Thieves Technical Alpha, so our attention has been elsewhere. So, while I haven't forgotten about FortuneFish, I haven't exactly been keeping up with them either. And with all due respect to their initial efforts, their game Cat Logic really wasn't aimed at vintage Rare fans, was it? I mean, I'm sure it was just a fine title and all, but Dr. Wiggle's Cat Logic wasn't the kind of game that would immediately grab us by the ghoulies, so to speak. But a couple of days ago, FortuneFish came back into the public light with their new game. And their new game is entitled Kroko Bongo. It's for iOS, iPhone, iPad, Apple devices. And it's free. It's a free download. So, assuming you have the proper hardware, you have to have a newer iPhone. It won't work on the older models. But assuming you have something from the last couple of generations, you will be able to play it for free. And it's immediately apparent by looking at it, if the name itself didn't tip its hand to you, that...
I'm curious, do you... Like, it took me a while before I'd stop accidentally calling it Congo Bongo. Has that been the same for you?
Considering I have spent more than half of my life trying to discipline myself into purging the Donkey Kong Country cartoon show from my mental storage banks, I haven't had that problem, Cameron. My only faux pas when it comes to Kroko Bongo's nomenclature, I don't know why I'm wheeling out the heavy verbiage today, is that I've been spelling Kroko Bongo Kroco.
That's that's a good point. I mean, you can kind of tell who this is laser focused on just by how they've chosen to spell Croc in the title.
Either Donkey Kong Country fans or Mortal Kombat fans, one of the two.
Or Mario Kart fans, maybe.
Yeah, to a lesser extent, yeah. But Kroko Bongo, it's blatantly, I mean, it's not even like they're trying to hide it. They're very open about it on social media. They've got a very active social media presence at the moment, by the way. At Kroko Bongo, I believe.
At Kroko Bongo Game.
Okay. Because maybe there's already another Kroko Bongo.
No, yeah, not to be confused with Kroko Bongo the sandwich.
At Kroko Bongo Game. Okay. So they've been very active and very seductive towards Donkey Kong Country fans. Specifically the Kremlin fans. The heavy contingent of Kremlin campaigners on Twitter who mobilized during the Smash 4 drama of, we want K. Rool and Smash Brothers. And all they got from it was a lousy costume.
Yeah, this is an extremely specific thing to target if you step back and think about it. Just fans of the enemy species from a video game series from the mid-90s.
From my perspective, and I don't have any insight into the inner workings of FortuneFish, nor will I ever, considering it is related to the Stamper Brothers, and unless they dole out little snippets through their newly loved day, we're not going to learn much. But what I think FortuneFish might have done is that they wanted their new project to appeal to Rare fans, because Yooka-Laylee has shown there is definitely a lucrative market to be had there. And it's not like it was a decade ago where people were questioning whether or not we still existed, we being the Rare fan base. No, we're definitely there, and everyone is reaping the rewards who's tapping into it at the moment. So I think FortuneFish looked at what itches haven't been scratched recently for Donkey Kong Country fans by either Rare, Platonic, or Retro. And they looked at Retro's Donkey Kong Country games, maybe, and they said, okay, Retro did this, but what haven't they done? And what can we celebrate that the fans have been missing? And for starters, it's the protagonist and the enemies of the game. And I don't think it's a stretch to say they look to the Kremlins for inspiration here. Because holy shit, Cameron, before we even get to that, but before we get to the art direction, I do think we would be at fault if we didn't explain exactly what Kroko Bongo was and how it played. It is a 2D side-scroller, but it's a runner game. For those of you who are listening to the show who aren't familiar with what a runner is.
An auto runner.
Auto runner. Yeah, that's it. So like Super Mario Run. But that's the name of the Mario one, right?
Yeah, I think there's also like a Rayman Jungle Run, a few others, Sonic Runners. This is like sort of a niche that's been carved out on mobile platforms, I guess because of how a touchscreen input generally works and is friendly to.
Yeah. Now, I downloaded Super Mario Run and hated it. I almost threw my phone across the room because I loathed it so. It wasn't the kind of game for me. And to be fair, it didn't have much appeal to me because it used the new Super Mario Brothers aesthetic, which I've been on the record countless times as disliking immensely. And before you call in and say, Hyle hates Nintendo, boop, 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 keep in mind that I love the way Super Mario Odyssey is looking, okay? I like the art direction of many Mario games. I just hate the static look 2D Mario has been stuck in since the mid-aughts or so. I don't care for it. But, I don't like auto runners in general. And I feel like I just talked about this sort of on the last episode with Nick and Josh Wallen from Off the Geek Critique. I'm a gamer who likes to take his time with his games. And while I can eventually build myself up into the rhythmic, I can master the stage with little to no effort kind of gameplay, when I'm initially playing the game, I take my sweet-ass time. I want to soak in every single drop with every single level. I want to explore. I want to study the backgrounds. I want to live and breathe that gaming environment. And you can't do that with an auto runner. It's just zoom, zoom, zoom. And when you marry that with the new Super Mario Bros. Style, you're really just going to be giving me a miserable time. So Super Mario Run was not something I really devoted much time to. Pokemon Go was the Nintendo-related mobile app I spent more time playing last year, before giving up on that one altogether because its charms were just limited to me. But Kroko Bongo, it does have some appealing aspects for me, mainly being directly inspired by Donkey Kong Country. But not just Donkey Kong Country, but other post-Rare Donkey Kong games. And I don't think it's a stretch to say, Cameron, that they looked to Donkey Kong Jungle Beat for inspiration.
Yeah, that was something I observed, like, playing this. It was a thought that occurred to me. I wouldn't say this is what Donkey Kong Jungle Beat should have been, is the thought that occurred to me, but it's what I distinctly recall Jungle Beat, like, kind of being marketed as, which was a rhythm-based platformer. Or at least I remember rhythm being a key component that I would see when people would try to, like, describe it or pitch it. And
now, Cameron, I'm not that familiar with your relationship with Jungle Beat. Have you played it extensively?
I haven't played it to the extent like that I have all the platinum medals. I've definitely run through the entire game, and it is a very fun game. But I think it's disingenuous to say it's heavily invested in rhythm.
I don't know.
Insofar as a relationship with the music.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, because, I 100% completed Jungle Beat a few years ago and fell in love with it after being one of its most strident opponents when it was released. Mostly due to the terrible PR that its developers were doling out at the time. It just rubbed Donkey Kong Country fans the wrong way. Post-returns, post-retro, I was able to go back and just say, hey, Jungle Beat, it's a fucking phenomenal game. All things aside, all personal grievances aside, it's a great game.
Right. I want to stress that I do think Jungle Beat is a lot of fun. And when I say Kroko Bongo is more along the lines of what I expected from the marketing, it's like how you guys went over on the Sonic Mania episode, where saying Sonic is about speed is a little bit disingenuous. But what you'll find in the actual game is perfectly valid and a lot of fun.
Yeah, anyway, the rhythm is more in tune with the gameplay with Jungle Beat rather than music. And granted, there was rhythm-based gameplay with the Donkey Kong Country series. It just wasn't made manifest. It was layered in the texture. It wasn't really pronounced. But it's funny how music has always played a part in the Donkey Kong series. Music or rhythm. And Kroko Bongo brings that to the forefront. Obviously, you got bongos as items that play a significant part in the game. Because every time you approach a bongo, you have to tap the screen. And much like Donkey Konga, however close you are to the center of it determines how many points you get.
Yeah, in time with the music, it should be stressed. That's a large aspect of this game, to the point where it recommends you right at the splash screen play it with headphones.
Right. Which was hard for me to adjust to because I was playing it while sitting at my desk in front of my computer. And I always have my earbuds plugged into that. And while I was initially too lazy to switch them out, and my phone is usually something I keep on silent, so I was reluctant to go along with their suggestion. So anyway, Kroko Bongo, yeah. It's only 5 stages, but FortuneFish claims that it's a potential demo for something much larger down the line. They may want to expand the Kroko Bongo concept, which would be very exciting if they did, because, I played through a few of the stages at the time of this recording. Fully honestly, I haven't beaten it. I haven't mastered it in the time since I picked it up. and that is because I was initially terrible at it.
Yeah, I would compare. I'm kind of the same way with Kroko Bongo. It's taking me a while to get acclimated to it. I mean, part of the problem is I'm currently playing it on an iPhone 5S, which is perfectly capable of running the game, but the device itself has a very small screen. Like, this isn't a problem with the program, it's the hardware I've chosen to play it on because that's what's available. And it's worth pointing out, we've said this game is playable currently only on iOS devices. It looks like the FortuneFish plans to have this playable on other devices. They've just elected to keep it on the Apple Marketplace for the time being because that's for an ease of testing and availability while they work on the game and refine it.
Yeah, so when I was initially playing Kroko Bongo, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. Because it was an auto runner, and I'm not really adept at that. It's not my style of gameplay. And I kept freaking out because I kept missing things, and I just wanted to restart. And I wasn't allowing myself to get any good at it. I was basically punishing myself for not being an expert right out of the gate. And because of that, I wasn't allowing myself to enjoy it. So, about an hour and a half before we recorded this episode, I sat down with it and just told myself, okay, just freeball it here. Let it roll, let it hang out however it may, and just play through as much of it as you can. Don't worry about missing medallions, because there's like 5 medallions per stage that you have to collect, and you don't have to collect them, but they go towards your score and your ranking. And, don't worry about missing a standard collectible, which I guess are the equivalent to bananas, and those are musical notes, which I'm kind of a tip of the hat to Banjo-Kazooie, but, I kept missing those, and I wasn't hitting every one. So it was hard for me, being the careful platformer gamer that I am, to just blow past everything and not being able to go back and get them. Sometimes you can backtrack, but your character has to run into something first to turn around. It makes you go to the left.
Yeah, I thought of this analogy before we started recording the episode, and I think it's apropos considering the nature of the game, is that playing levels in this game is kind of like learning an instrument and playing a song with the sheet music in front of you, I think. The first few times you try it, you're probably not going to be that great at it, and it may be tempting to just give up, but the more you attempt it, the better you get. And I mean, just like a song, you miss one note in the song, that's it. You've played the song a little bit off, and you just kind of have to either roll with it or start again.
Right, yeah. And as someone who is not a musician, who is just very OCD about all of his output, it's hard for me to...
Oh yeah, I'm not a musician either. I'm kind of just talking out of my butt from the various attempts at me trying to play instruments.
Right. But I have to say that as I was playing it about 90 minutes ago, I was starting to get the feel of it for it. I was really starting to enjoy it. And each time I died and had to restart, I would get a little bit better, a little bit more accomplished, kind of like you would a regular platformer with a high difficulty threshold. So, yeah, I can't wait to dig back into Kroko Bongo. It's a lot of fun. And of course, as a Donkey Kong Country fan, so much of the aesthetic and character design is specifically targeted towards my brain. So let's talk about these character designs, Cameron. The protagonist, I guess he's the protagonist, is named Kroko Bongo. But do we know if that's actually his name or not?
According to the Twitter account, we at least know his first name is Kroko, with the K.
Okay, well, we'll just call him Kroko for now.
Yeah, I know that because of another tidbit that'll come up in the course of this discussion.
Okay, well, Kroko. His official character art versus his in-game design. There seems to be a little bit of a difference. He seems to have feathers or fur, despite being a crocodile. He's very fuzzy looking.
Yeah, I thought this was a curious discrepancy too. The character art that's floating around for him, as well as the 2D loading screen, have him in a fuzzy state, whereas the in-game model and the app icon itself have him as a more traditional scaly crocodile. I looked into why this is, and apparently the Bongo Twitter account weighed into it. This is how I learned his name. Apparently, Kroko is supposed to be fuzzy. He's a member of the Fluffigator species.
But his in-game model is not fluffy.
It's apparently because real-time furry shenanigans are a bit much for a early in development app. A bit hard on the hardware at the moment. So
this kind of ties back into the episode we did a couple of weeks ago, Cameron. The deal of the art, where the early Donkey Kong model in Donkey Kong Country actually has 4 fingers, despite the finalized promotional renders actually having 5. So this is one of those discrepancies that you just kind of have to roll with. He's supposed to be fuzzy.
Yeah, and I'll be curious if they stick with this direction or go with the scaly direction in the long run, because it seems like even though fuzzy seems to be their intention, the actual assets are kind of like half and half at the moment. And I wonder if maybe they'll see what's better received. It's taken me a little bit of time to accept the fur, just because something in my brain is rejecting the concept of a furry crocodile.
Well, especially crocodiles who look so much like the Kremlings. And this isn't just us looking way too much into this and, we're Donkey Kong fans, so we're going to see Kremlings. No, they're clearly designed to evoke the Kremlings and to appeal to fans of the Kremlings. The loud vocal contingent of Kremling fanatics out there. So the designs of these guys, of Kroko himself and then the enemies themselves, who are supposed to be more traditional types of crocodiles, or are they supposed to be alligators, technically, in this game, to differentiate themselves from the Kremlings? I'm
not entirely sure. I mean, Kroko himself, obviously crocodile. From the artwork I've seen, they still seem to have, as I recall, the main difference you find between crocodiles and alligators in nature is the length of the nose. And they look to be about the same body shape as Kroko himself, so I'm just assuming they're regular crocodiles.
Well, yeah, but you said fluffigator, so I was a little bit confused.
Oh, wow, yeah, I did not even catch that. Very, very odd.
But, while the Kremlings were supposed to be crocodiles, they weren't crocodiles. They were Kremlings, a made-up species who were half man, half crocodile. So
Kroko can be whatever he wants.
Well, if he's a fluffigator, he's his own thing, like the Kremlings. And honestly, I'm not going to concern myself with the lore of this game right now, because at this point in time, this game is not part of the Donkey Kong universe.
Speaking of biological aspects and the Kremlings, I noticed both Kroko and the green enemy reptile he faces, the promotional art for them, they have these head spikes, and it kind of reminds me of the head spikes on, say, Crusha, or even in general, I kind of get shades of the James Ryman concept art from before the Kremlings were the Kremlings.
I remember the early K. Rool concept art.
Crud and Crash, the two illustrations. Yeah, that's what these kind of remind me of. I'm also seeing design cues a bit that I don't see so much in the original Donkey Kong Country games, but the brand of Kremlings we started to see from King of Swing onwards, once Payon came in.
Right. So this is a point I wanted to bring up. So they didn't just use the early Donkey Kong Country 1994 era Kremling designs and then kind of exaggerate them. They kind of remind me a bit of the Donkey Kong Country 3 era Kremling designs, where they took what was pre-established and made them slightly funkier. I mean, Kroko Bongo himself, he's a furry crocodile or alligator man. It just kind of reminds me of something you would have seen in DKC 3. A fuzzy Kremlin wouldn't have been out of place in that game.
Yeah, and I noticed both Kroko and the Green Enemy also have the skull belt and tattered shorts. Skull belt was something I believe we first saw in K. Rool himself in DKC 2, I think. And then we didn't see it on the enemies, I believe, just offhand until DK64. But the skull and tattered shorts, I think we first saw that in King of Swing.
That was the style that the critters started wearing because starting with DK64 up through the very early buyout era, like in Mario Power Tennis, the critters would appear as their DK64 selves, the leather daddy design. The Crunch style, actually, from Diddy Kong Racing, where they'd had the leather vest.
Yeah.
Now, that's the way the critters would appear up until King of Swing, when they started wearing the shorts.
Yeah, this was sort of like the Marvel's ultimate critter, the sort of amalgamation of everything that had been done with them before.
Yeah, but my God, the green guys alone. Well, I mean, the little red guys, the ones who walk around, they're wearing what I think is underwear. They're wearing Y-front underwear, by the way.
In a reverse color scheme to Mr. Pants, because it's white Y-fronts with red stitching.
So I wonder if that's a Mr. Pants reference. I very much doubt it.
I think it's just underwear is inherently funny.
And also, I think they're little kids, so they're wearing what is considered, very juvenile underwear, like, tighty whities or Y-front underwear.
Just by nature of it being a tiny red croc with a big head, I was thinking of Bazooka from DKC3.
Well, see, I was thinking by their stature, and granted, they can get up on their hind legs, but they remind me of the claptraps or clamp-ons or crimps, I believe, from DKC3.
Yeah.
Just that lineage of actual kind of crocodile-esque Kremlin who are not quite bipedal. While the green enemies are just a much more muscular type of critter. They're a little bit more jacked, not quite like, Crusha was jacked, but just a little more muscular definition.
Yeah, I'd say, like, if you gave me this image out of context and told me it was, like, concept art for Donkey Kong Country 6, I would probably, not believe you because I've seen fake shit all the time, but it would be plausible to me.
Yeah, this reminds me of what the Kremlins could have looked like had Rare made Donkey Kong Country 4, or had there been a Donkey Kong game by Rare after Donkey Kong 64 that wasn't just a portable remake.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the Kremlins filtered through a different lens once more.
And I think it reminds me a little bit of DKC 3, because the art direction could have conceivably followed after what we saw with that game. But immediately seeing these guys, it just strikes that happy center of your brain. Oh, yeah. It's like being a drug addict and finally getting a hit after a period of sobriety and withdrawal. Not that I would know anything about that, of course.
You got any man croc, man?
But in addition to the character designs, there is also the environments and the atmosphere of the game. And it is very much in tune with early Donkey Kong Country, in that they're all very much naturalistic environments. You get some elements from the real world blending in. I mean, like there's these stone heads in the third level where they're kind of like the Moai heads, the Easter Island heads, but tweaked. But you've got these sprawling jungle backgrounds and sand dunes. It's very much designed to be cartoony realistic.
Like how Retro's games are.
Well, I would say even more realistic than Retro's games, because Retro's games do the cartoony realism, but they tend to veer more into cartoony than a Rare style did. And I would say this is maybe more of a middle ground between the two, but it veers more in the Rare style, where things aren't quite as exaggerated. They're more low-key, just slightly off-center from reality.
I'd say that. I think the color sensibilities remind me a little bit more of Retros, but I think that may just be modern sensibilities in general.
Yeah, right. And you don't have the more muted colors of the ACM graphics, but I think the actual designs themselves feature less like sharp angles than you get with retros games. But, you're the design guy. I'm just talking out of my ass here.
Yeah, if we keep going down this road, this episode will be another hour. So I'll just shut up and move on.
But it is worth pointing out that there are minecarts in this game. So if you were convinced before who they're marketing this game towards, there's minecarts. Come on. By the way, the minecart stages are very difficult. I've played the first one, and so far I keep getting a little bit further, but then I always end up hitting one of the glowing red hands, and you have to duck or extend yourself above them, and getting the exact timing right takes a lot of practice and patience.
Yeah, the minecart stages, I think, are significantly more difficult than anything else by virtue of them being stages where you can't really miss a beat, where you will plow into an obstacle head first, whereas the earlier levels usually have, at least for a few of their hazards, something more forgiving, like if you mess up, you'll just take a lower path.
Right. But can you imagine if Jungle Beat had minecart stages? How much of that, animosity at the time would have been mitigated had they just thrown in something recognizable that was so entrenched in the lore of Donkey Kong Country? And it would have been cool to see how, Jungle Beat could have pulled it off in their rhythm structure,
I'm trying to, imagine minecarts as colored through the lens of, Jungle Beat's sort of tendency to do what the original games did, but not quite, like how Hoofer was sort of their Rambi. And I'm just trying to think of what they would have used for a minecart. Would it have just been something surreal, I don't know, a mushroom with spiral wheels going down a vine or something? I don't know.
Would have been a stick of celery with legs.
It'd have been the bathtub from Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah, Jungle Beat, as much as I love it, it's still in a lot of respects like a drug trip.
Yeah, I'm ragging on it, but it's a very surreal game.
It's the most Japanese out of all Donkey Kong platformers, by virtue of being developed in Japan. But, it definitely looked more towards the East than the West for inspiration, which is fine. But, we just wish it wouldn't have been so blatant about trying to erase and replace what came before. But again, all of those hurt feelings are in the past. I really do love Jungle Beat. But, Kroko Bongo.
Yeah, I want to see this have legs, and
could you imagine if FortuneFish reached out and expanded towards developing for the Switch? I kind of want to see this as more than just a mobile game.
I believe they've mentioned something about this on their Twitter account. I can't quite find it. They don't have plans for the Switch at the moment, but I don't know if they're ruling it out. And at the very least, I think they are looking at Android platforms, and this will be widely available at some point. Just it depends on where. But they've had people giving them feedback we want this on Switch. So, and this early in development, things could radically shift and be decided based on the feedback they're getting, which will be very interesting to see. Okay, I found the exact comment. Seeing this game today has absolutely made my day. A Nintendo Switch port would be very much appreciated. The response was, "We'll see what we can do, smiley face. Early days yet, but your comments have been noted." Smiley face.
And granted, this is a great bedrock they have as a proof of concept. They have 5 levels, and it would be amazing if they could expand this into a full home console release. I'm not just trying to be dismissive towards the mobile platform. I realize how important it is for modern gaming. But I kind of want more meat on these bones, and I love what I've seen with Kroko Bongo so far, and I'm really starting to have fun with it. So I want there to be sort of a light at the end of this tunnel where there's this robust, long game coming.
I've established my main concern is being able to play it on a screen large enough for me to see. It being on the Switch, I could put it on any television, and that's a big enough screen.
It would be great if they could make it compatible with the DK bongos in some form or fashion.
And since the tapping doesn't seem to depend on any particular placement, it doesn't seem like button input would be that too big of a stretch. So far, it depends on which direction they want to head with this.
Exactly. But I know a lot of people are asking, is Kroko Bongo part of the Donkey Kong universe? And no, there's nothing in the game to tip in that direction. These aren't Kremlings, at least not explicitly. I know some people have headcanon, that says they're Kremlings, but
this whole thing feels like it's from some weird Earth 3 version of the DKU.
Yeah. Well, I used the DC Comics analogy on Twitter, actually, where I said something to the effect of that it felt like there had been a crisis in a multiverse, and several Donkey Kong games got merged into one Earth. I mean, that's kind of the way it feels.
Mr. Pants' son, Toby, punched a hole in reality. And
Right. So we've had a few calls about Kroko Bongo, and I want to get to those, and then we'll discuss the other game on our docket this episode, and that's Tamarin by Chameleon Games.
I think Tamarin is what my name would be in this alternate universe.
This is Kongversation from Twitter here to talk about Congo Bongo. Kroko Bongo. But yeah, I would talk about Congo Bongo, but unfortunately, I am stuck in a time period that does not know these newfangled iOS phones. I am calling on one of those weird dial phone things. It's really weird. Please help me. I'm stuck. I haven't had food in weeks.
Do we need to clarify that the Kongversation hotline is not a emergency helpline? I feel like we get a lot of these calls where people are trapped outside or in dangerous environments and want us to aid them in some way.
Yeah. Maybe this is the way it has to be to cull the population a bit. I mean, the Earth is overpopulated, so maybe the Kongversation's place in the universe is to reduce the human population a bit, one at a time. But if nothing else, you can use your burner phone to order some methamphetamine, and then you'll have enough energy to get someplace where you can get some food. And then maybe get into the drug trade and earn enough money to get yourself a phone that can play Kroko Bongo. That's my advice. Thank you for the call. Let's hear what our next caller has to say about Kroko Bongo.
Hi, I am Gibbon. I'm calling in about Kroko Bongo. And I was just struck by a thought and figured I'd call in and preempt but why is Kroko fuzzy? Questions, and just point out that maybe he's like a genetic throwback, and those are feathers. Yeah. I don't know, that's really all I got. The game looks amazing. Glad you're doing an episode about it. Can't wait to listen. Thanks. Bye.
Well, thank you, Gibbon.
Yeah, that's very interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad I mentioned feathers earlier instead of just going straight to fur, which, again, this game is too new and there's no instruction manual attached to it, so it's hard to get a read on the lore of Kroko Bongo. And again, without any connections to the Donkey Kong universe, I'm not really going to concern myself with all of that at the moment, but yeah, perhaps. Maybe there was an evolutionary split between the Fluffigators and then these other Kremling-type baddies. Hard to say.
Well, I mean, I've stressed that it's taking me a little bit to accept the fuzzy gator, if that's hair, but, I mean, I know I'm a big proponent as of late of seeing more, when dinosaurs show up in media, I like to see feathery dinosaurs more than as is generally, accepted to be more scientifically accurate, whereas, I think, most of the time we just see dinosaurs going with the Jurassic Park look because that's what people know. But
Now, to be fair to the Donkey Kong universe and to Rare, the dinosaurs from the planet Saria are not technically Earth dinosaurs, so they do not have to have feathers.
Right.
They can be the traditional Hollywood dinosaur, and that's fine. And that also explains how the dinosaurs on Timbers Island and the Isle Hags and Willow Woods all have that traditional look.
Right. And I mean, I'm not necessarily just saying that because I'm pushing up my glasses and saying, well, actually, dinosaurs look like... I kind of feel like feathered dinosaurs can look really, really cool, and it's kind of an aesthetic choice in creature design that's really underutilized. You can get some cool looks out of it. So if that's the case here, I'm pretty open to that.
By the way, I Am Gibbon is also in our live stream, available for $5 and up patrons, and he wanted to bring up a point about Jungle Beat's potential minecarts. And he said that he believes Jungle Beat's minecarts could have been, and I quote here, like hand pump cars where you have to work the handle up and down. Sort of like what you saw in Banjo-Tooie when you had to race Canary Mary the first time. That's my interjection, not his.
I guess you'd race like Hellabird on it.
Yeah, exactly.
You see, I was kind of into that before you compared it to the Canary Mary race, and now I'm just kind of soured on it.
But again, there is a potential connection to Canary Mary because, there's Chopper Bird, who's just a dude dressed like a Hellabird.
Oh, that's right. Chopper Bird is I was getting their names mixed up.
That's okay. That's why I'm here. That's what I have to contribute to everything DK Vine related, to be the continuity stickler. Anyway, thank you for the call. So let's take one more call, and then we'll get to this Tamarin discussion. Cameron?
Hey guys, it's Ethan or Bayan the Bear here, and okay. So I heard the topic this week was 2 recent rare spiritual successors. I know there was a Jet Force Gemini one. I can't remember the name. I mean, I looked a little into it. It looks nice, but I guess the one I kind of want to focus on is, Kroko Bongo by the Stamper Brothers, which looks really interesting. And I know it's kind of been floating around the forum, but I just kind of want to ask, could it be DKU? Because I know I'm kind of new. Well, I mean, I've been here a couple months. I've been trying to integrate myself. But I know one of the rules that I've definitely heard pop up a lot is the Pedo Kong, where it's like, if Rare or someone associated makes a game, starring a character that's supposed to be connected to Donkey Kong, but it's not an established character, then, yeah, it's DKU. I wonder if that thing can still fall under with Kroko Bongo, because, I mean, look at Kroko. He's a crocodile. His name starts with a K. Could he not be some sort of strange member of the Kremlings? Could he fall under it? Because it's not like it's a big leap in logic. The game really is DKC inspired, so it could easily fit into the whole universe. But either way, both of the games look really nice, and it's nice to see some rare spiritual successors, which will keep me nice and tight until Playtonic announces more content for ukulele and future projects. Because, oh boy, Playtonic, let me tell you, I'm so excited for what they got in store. So, yeah, that's my thoughts. Bye! Bye.
Thanks for the call, Ban Bear. Yeah, I think the whole is Kroko a Kremlin debate, I think it's kind of moot at this point. If he's supposed to be a fluffigator, unless...
Well, that could be a subspecies of Kremlin.
No, that's true.
Maybe that's what Calypso and Cass are, and they just shave everything but the top of their heads.
I think it does pose an interesting philosophical question. I mean, granted, we said that the Pedo Kong rule no longer applies, but
yeah, I enjoy that we've tried to kind of bury that, but it's still so prevalent that people who express that they're new and only have a base understanding of the concepts know exactly what it is by name.
Oh yeah, there's no killing that now. It's like a shambling corpse that always claws its way out of its grave. Now, we'd have to take it to the DKU tribunal for a future episode, but what would be required would be for FortuneFish, the stampers, whether they be Chris, Tim, or son of Tim, striking up a deal with Nintendo and saying, yes, these are Kremlings. Like, let's say for the Switch version that they work out some sort of deal, because Nintendo doesn't want to use the Kremlings, but they own the Kremlings. They can make money off of the Kremlings. And, some sort of financial changing of hands happens, and they say, okay, for the Switch version, we're going to announce these are Kremlings officially. And then we'd have to go back to the drawing board and say, well, what does that mean? Because this isn't rare, but these are the stampers, and it's got Nintendo's blessing.
Well, we've previously established, I think, that drones and by extension species can't make a game DKU, but I think in this particular case we might have to rethink that.
Right, especially because Pedo Kong would technically just be a drone Kong when you think about it. I mean, if you really break it down. And we discount Chain Kong and Gorilla from Super Mario RPG because that was Square with no connection to Rare in a Mario game. And while this wouldn't be rare, this would be the male genitalia from which the ejaculate that is rare sprung out from.
These are Kremlings that we're talking about. You could have just said the source power or whatever.
I could have, Cameron, but I have a shelf full of cookbooks behind me, so pardon me if my mind goes in that direction. So this would be a major tribunal case if this came up.
The short answer, I think, because his question was, could this be DKU? The answer is yes.
Yes, it could. But as of this moment in time, no, it is not. And I think right now it has to be definitive that it is not. Circumstances could obviously change. And, with enough prodding, maybe they could change. You have to keep in mind, FortuneFish has not had this level of interaction with fans that Platonic has had. And the whole reason we got a goldfish in Ukulele was due to fan interaction. So, don't just rest on your laurels. FortuneFish, Kroko, Bongo, they're active on social media. They're listening.
And I'd also stipulate, as with Sea of Thieves and Ukulele at various points, or, still with the case of Sea of Thieves, just because we don't know if something is DKU or if we know it's explicitly not, doesn't mean we can't talk about it and still do conversations and such. Right.
I mean, look, we're talking about it right now. It's not like we're going to erase this episode from the archives or anything.
It would be kind of against the spirit of the site to just pretend this doesn't exist until, say, Mr. Ribs saunters into the middle of the screen and says, "Hello, it is me, Mr. Ribs. And I am definitely me and not a artificial construct or a statue. Diddly-dee."
I like how in your hypothetical scenario, for this obvious homage to Donkey Kong Country, it's Mr. Ribs that makes it DKU. Yeah, I mean, we can compartmentalize here. We can talk about these spiritual successors and give them adequate coverage without embracing them as part of the Donkey Kong universe concept, the rare shared universe totality. I mean, we're adults. We can do both. Yeah, thank you for the call, Ban Bear. So, Cameron, to change gears here, unlike Kroko Bongo, I have no rhythm. Let's talk about Tamarin. And Tamarin is something I just learned about this week, but it was actually announced at Gamescom in Germany a week or two ago. And this is one that is a bit of a baffler, a baffle bear, if you will. So, This is a newly announced studio. They've apparently been a unit for a couple of years, but they haven't really had their coming out party until Gamescom. They're called Chameleon Games, and the question is, who are Chameleon Games? Well, that we're still not quite sure about. It's still a mystery. But here's what we do know. We know that they utilize a blue-gold logo like Rare and Playtonic. In this case, it's a little chameleon character rolled up into a ball that's the gold, and it's usually cast against a blue background. Now, they don't have a direct connection to Playtonic that we're aware of, but it's amusing to me that they picked a chameleon as their mascot. Essentially what Yuka is.
Yeah, just of any animal, just a chameleon.
Yeah, so the actual talent behind Chameleon Games is not being officially broadcast. But I've done some digging, and they appear to be mostly newcomers, I believe, or at least people who haven't had a lot of public exposure in the games industry like Playtonic did. And a lot of them seem to be from Norway. I'm not sure where Chameleon itself is located, but I've done some Twitter stalking, and from what I can gather, there are some Norwegians who live in the UK that are working for Chameleon or doing work for Chameleon. So that tells me that they're not actually made up of a bunch of ex-Rare vets like Playtonic was. But one of our readers and informal informants, who goes by the pseudonym Johnny Kong, he's provided us some music videos for our YouTube channel over the last couple of years. And he's reached out to Chameleon and got some information for us. So, according to Chameleon themselves, David Wise is doing music for the game. And I quote, a sizable number of former Rare people are also doing art and music for the game. Now, who besides David Wise, we still don't know. But I did find it interesting that Graham Norgate was one of the first people who followed them on Twitter. Now, it could have simply been that Graham Norgate was at Gamescom or was following news from Gamescom, saw Tamarin and thought, hey, that looks pretty cool. I want to stay abreast of any news from that game. It doesn't necessarily mean that Graham Norgate is working for them or with them, but interesting all the same. Now, without any further information, it would suggest that the extended Rare family is doing some freelance work for the game, much in the same way Grant Kirkhope, Dave Wise, and Steve Burke, did music for Playtonic with Yooka-Laylee. They weren't actually employed by Playtonic full-time. So, I would imagine that Chameleon Games, they're probably comprised of Rare fans who formed their own studio and were then able to hire Rare people to do art and music to help make it more authentic. But, we don't know yet. So, watch this space.
Yeah, I found that sort of interesting about the way Chameleon has sort of given us information on this game, which there isn't a lot of information made public about this, but I haven't seen like a huge push in the direction of from the makers of X title.
Right.
The most explicit reference I've found so far is on a Facebook post from them early in the month. They say inspired by the classic Donkey Kong Country games, and so far I think that's the only explicit reference to a Rare title or team I've seen in their promotion.
Well, explicit. I mean, there are a lot of implicit references.
Oh, definitely.
So, again, watch this space. We'll learn more about Chameleon, I'm sure, over the coming weeks and months. But I'm pretty sure if it was formed by former Rare people, that would be broadcast in the headlines. Made by the people who made Jet Force Gemini, etc., etc., etc. But, according to them, Dave Wise did do the music that was in their alpha trailer. So, I want to play that real quick. This is directly from the alpha trailer. So, There's some sound effects from the game, and we'll talk about the sound effects in a little bit too. But this is apparently the music of David Wise. So shut up and listen, everybody. I really got into the music there, and then the gunfire just startled the hell out of me.
Yeah. We'll get into the very distinct sound of that firefight in a bit.
So here's what Chameleon has to say on their website at chameleongames.com. With agile and acrobatic moves, Tamarin leaps through the atmospheric northern forest, searching for his captured animal friends. Magical fireflies unlock a secret underground world of dancing ants. With an army approaching from underneath, can Tamarin splatter his way through before it's too late? Lads? So this is kind of a weird...
It's like a pretty... there's like a tonal dissonance in the first part of that verb in the last sentence.
Well, there's a bit of tonal dissonance in that trailer as well. There's a definite attempt at tapping into the naturalistic nature vibes of the Donkey Kong Country series, specifically that first game, but put into a 3D setting. It kind of reminds me of what we initially hoped Donkey Kong 64 would give us before it went into its more cartoony direction. Or, I guess more accurately, its more cartoony direction was made apparent to us. But, I said the dissonance there comes from not just looking towards Donkey Kong Country for inspiration, with its main character and natural world and David Wise music, but the quite heavy Jet Force Gemini element in the game as well. And, you heard when Ban Bear called in, he referred to Tamarin not by name, but just called it that Jet Force Gemini type game, which is how I think a lot of people, especially Rare fans, are remembering this when they look at the trailer. And, I don't think that's an unfair comparison to make when we talk about the art direction of some of the enemies in the game and the sound effects.
Like, let's just outright say... some of the sound effects in that trailer are straight from Jet Force Gemini, not like...
Which I wouldn't hold it against Chameleon Games because it is an alpha trailer, so I imagine a lot of that are just placeholder elements. They know what the direction they want to take things are, so they're using that until those elements are finalized. But yeah, they're taken straight from Jet Force.
Well, also, I don't know how many people would split hairs over the rights to what's probably like a stock sound effect.
Oh, yeah, because I don't think Rare really did much in the way of Foley back in the day. I think they mostly used sound effect libraries.
Like a lot of a lot of the sound effects in Jet Force you'll like also hear in Conquer.
Right. Rare did buy or rent sound effect libraries, as is standard in the entertainment industry. But now after they moved into Manor Park in the late '90s, they built a Foley stage. And actually, when I was at Rare last year, Robin Beanland took us for a tour of the studio, and they've got a little room off the main sound stage where they record all of the sound effects. And all of the sound effects for Sea of Thieves, by the way, are made in-house. But that wouldn't have been the case for Jet Force, which was developed, I think, right on the cusp of them moving into Manor Park. Anyway, let's talk about the art. So before we get into those ants, let's get into the Tamarin character. Tamarin is his name and is what he is. And, from my perspective, he would look right at home in the Donkey Kong universe. He's even got 4 fingers, as traditional DK monkeys should. Sans prosthetic golfing fingers.
Yeah, we don't know. Maybe he'll get prosthetic, semi-automatic rifle handling hands later in the game.
Yeah, so the first part of the trailer I loved. I thought it was a bit sad the ants blew up his home, and he does a little boo-hoo. He cries, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of bleak. But when he was running through the forest, I dug that he could climb walls and surfaces. He's very clingy, like a monkey or Tamarin, should be. So I was really loving it, and the David Wise music, and my God, Cameron, it sounds like it's just straight from Tropical Freeze.
Yeah, I actually did not know David Wise was the composer until right before we got to record this episode, but watching the trailer, I was telling myself, okay, either that sounds like David Wise or whoever is doing it is very, very good at imitating his style. And, the pieces have sort of all clicked together now.
Well, it sounds, too, very much like modern-day Dave Wise. It sounds like a piece from Tropical Freeze, specifically from Autumn Heights.
We also have a little bit of, Donkey Kong Country and Banjo in the very beginning, in that the trailer starts with Tamarin leaving his house, and then it getting blown up, which is kind of like a condensed Banjo-Tooie story.
Yeah, a little bit.
And the first level of DKC.
Tamarin. I like the look of his world. Obviously this is still a little early, so it's not as polished as something like Yooka-Laylee is, but, it's a little early, so it's too soon to say as far as an untested team goes. So it's hard to say what this project is going to shape up to be as it evolves towards a final state. But, I'm digging it so far. It looks really nice. And it's the kind of thing celebrating nature that I really love. And it's the kind of Donkey Kong 64 experience I would have preferred from what we actually got with Donkey Kong 64. But we do have one kind of Donkey Kong 64 element, and that's Tamarin blowing away enemies with guns. Oh, wow. Wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, this is not something you get the impression of either looking at the splash image on their webpage or the first half of the trailer.
It's like the image you have when the famous story when Rare showed off DK64 to Miyamoto, and Donkey Kong pulled out a double-barreled shotgun, and I imagine if Miyamoto were wearing a monocle at the time, the monocle would have just dropped. Okay. From what I gather, though, from the trailer, you can get these weapons from the ants and then, turn the tables on them. But it's still a weird incongruence that this weird, cuddly little creature suddenly becomes John Rambo. And I'm imagining,
even later on in the trailer, another Jet Force element you see is the doors that are coded to only open if all the enemies are killed.
Yeah, well, let's talk about it. So, I'm not a Jet Force Gemini expert.
Oh, neither am I, but
it's Chad McCanna's bag. But I know enough about Jet Force that when I saw this, I said, "This is Jet Force." This is Jet Force Gemini and Donkey Kong's bastard child who has been raised in the wilderness by ants.
What it seemed like to me was like almost Jet Force, but instead of the actual Jet Force crew, if the main character was a tribal.
A little bit. There's a little bit of tribal in there as well, so anyway, let's talk about the ants, Cameron. They look like slightly buffer versions of Jet Force's ant enemies.
And not even just in they're ants and they're the enemies. It's humanoid blue ants with guns. They even kind of make a similar, if not the exact same sound effect when they get hurt.
Right. If the Bongo crocodiles resemble the Kremlins, very, very closely, that people can even delude themselves into thinking they're one and the same, then it's the same thing with the Tamarin ants and the Jet Force ants. They're basically the same thing. Now, I do like that insects are the antagonists of this game. It's something we really haven't seen. I mean, outside of Jet Force Gemini, of course, in the cartoony animal platformers that were made by Rare. We've had insect enemies, but usually they just work in tandem with the main enemy force. Think the Zingers with the Kremlins. Of course we had, capital B in Ukulele, but his main henchmen were more like genetic modified, creatures. There wasn't really too much in the way of bees, as enemies besides the main boss guy. So, I like that the ants are the bad guys. It's just a bit odd to me how militaristic things can get, but
I like the kind of idea that they're a literal underground society, and that's why everybody's kind of surprised by them, because that is a really good idea for ant villains.
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't know who among Rare, or X-Rare, I should say, is doing art for this game. So, I'm kind of Twitter stalking Chameleon, like I said, and I know Mark Stevenson from Platonic is now following them, but he followed them after we did, and then after a bunch of other Rare fans did, and after we've been blasting them on social media. So, he could just be interested in a project from that. And, he's probably got his hands full with Platonic as Mark Stevenson is, paid by... No, hold on. Mark Stevenson is paid by Platonic. He's a staffer. So, I don't know. It's interesting all the same. I'm interested in this, and who among ex-Rare staff could be contributing? But, it's unmistakably David Wise doing the music for this game. So, I wonder how many people who worked on Jet Force could be doing design work for this game.
Yeah, and it's weird. I can't nail down an art style signature look for this game the same way I could for Ukulele, where you see, like, the Steve Mails, the Mark Stevenson, like, vibes, like, coming through with every character or environment, or
right,
like you see that sort of same aesthetic cue from Banjo-Kazooie coming through. This looks kind of like its own beast, and I'm not sure if that's just the nature of this hardware being more than we're used to, with the images of the N64 games in our heads. But yeah, I'd be very curious to figure out who's manning the art direction for this title. And as we said, it could be a complete unknown from our perspective. I also noticed, looking back through this trailer, there's a little Banjo-Kazooie, a little shade of Banjo-Kazooie as well, with one critter about halfway through coming out of a hole in the ground, or leaves, as it looks.
I also noticed that the snake, the snake in the trailer?
Yeah, who has some vegetation clipping through him, unfortunately, but yeah, I do see him there.
It's early.
Yeah, it's early.
He reminds me a little bit of Slumber from off of Banjo-Tooie, but it's interesting. He doesn't have googly eyes. He has more understated, kind of regular snake eyes.
Yeah, he's more in line with the enemies, and I mean that's like a standard design trope in like any kind of thing with anthropomorphic animals, where like the the animals you're not supposed to sympathize with look more like actual real-life animals, whereas the sympathetic ones are more humanoid.
I mean, I like the general style of this game, and I love, like, you know, the setting of the Northern Forest. And I love how that's a proper noun, too. That's very rare. It reminds me a little bit of what Retro actually did with the North Seas in the lore of Tropical Freeze, which is where the snowmats hail from.
Yeah, and I'm sure just like Northern Cremisphere, we'll find out some obscure lore line that says it's like actually close to like the Antarctic Circle.
Don't let it eat you alive. But the whole North Seas thing is what sold the snowmats on me. Oh, they're from the North Seas. You know, even though we never saw the North Seas in the game, that just little tiny bit of lore, even though we never see it, it's this extremely northern part of the Rare Archipelago where these guys come from. And it helps flesh out so much of the game's world in your mind. But anyway, yeah, I love the look of the Northern Forest. And I also like this idea that there's going to be a split between above ground and below ground. The domain of the ants versus the domain of Tamarin and his forest friends. So, you know, however that's going to shake out, but it sounds like a fundamental game mechanic. So yeah, you know, I'm intrigued about seeing more on Tamarin.
That's that I think is the word that sums up my feelings on Tamarin in its entirety. I am very intrigued.
Yeah, and obviously the jury's still out, and we still don't know who among the Rare family is actually doing work on the game. But all of that isn't really necessary towards whether the game is good or not. And, you know, it's being directly inspired by the work of Rare, and I can speak directly to that kind of situation. I'm somebody who's done writing for Lobo Destroyo. You know, besides Grant Kirkhope doing some music for it, it's mostly a team of newcomers. So it'd be hypocritical to immediately dismiss the team behind Tamarin as well. So, you know, it is appealing to my sensibilities. So we'll be following it with great interest on DK Vine. So, yeah. Anyway, Cameron? What are you doing? Cameron, put down the gun! This is totally at odds with your portrayal in the earlier part of this podcast! Why do you have an AK-74, Cameron? Because your name rhymes with Tamarin.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.